Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka, and we are back with another thread. So if you're unfamiliar, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is bifurcated into two different regions. The OCG, which is played in Japan and stands for Official Card Game, and the TCG, which is played in America and stands for Trading Card Game. The OCG gets cards a couple of months earlier than the TCG, so frequently TCG players can look at what was good in the OCG to get an idea of what will be good in the coming months. That said, it's not always the case. See, the OCG follows a different release schedule and has a different ban list, which includes Max C, which means that occasionally a significant amount of the cards that are powerful over there fail to be powerful over here. Today we're asking what decks that were killers in the OCG didn't do much stateside, and we are beginning with this one, Adventure Tenyi. Now, we had a similar deck called Kitchen Sink that was kind of successful, but for a period of months, this was, if not a top 3 strategy, the literal best deck in the format. It utilized the adventure monsters, the Tenyi monsters, and cards like Rose Dragons in order to make powerful bosses out of the extra. Of course, it made use of Danglong, a card that we didn't have at the time, but it wasn't so integral to the plays that you would expect it to be literally unplayable when it came over here. And yet, Callie says Adventure PK for sure. This was practically the only thing worth playing in the OCG for an entire format, with only Flu as a real competitor. When it came to the TCG, it was just struggling to scrape tier 2. That is absolutely correct. In fact, Phantom Knight was expected to be the best deck like 16 formats in a row, largely because of memory from the OCG, and it almost always failed to convert. I mean, look at this deck. It's like just the Phantom Knight cards, Svelte Engine that puts up Rusty Bardish, a Dagdaline, and then can back it up with the adventure stuff in order to set more negates. Here, that failed to convert, and we really didn't get an adventure pile deck until like Prank It. Rebecca also has a good one. Invoked Dragoon is probably the best example of when the TCG was most fearful of the impact of Dragoon itself. This card saw tops in combo decks, but it was never really a large cut of the pie like it was in the OCG. Overseas Dragoon was like the name of the game for a significant amount of time. I guess you could argue that it had a lot to do with the existence of Max C, the fact that it really only had to go into the extra deck once over the course of the turn, and here, of course, we would just continue special summoning. And while Dragoon was very powerful in decks like Drytron that could integrate it into their end board by making Vertanaconda, it wasn't nearly as ubiquitous as it was over there. We didn't really have like a ton of decks whose whole game plan was Dragoon, for instance. Dustin says, damn, that's crazy. 18 plus instant fusions that it can also bait Ash Imperm for Hulk. Synchron Runic was something that people just sort of expected to be playable in the TCG, but in actuality, it never converted. This is one of those scenarios where I think the OCG honestly just missed the mark and played kind of a mid-combo deck in the face of what was a much more consistent Runic deck in, any of them. Kelly says, here's a list I like to call post-Syac decks that struggle more here because we have Full Power Branded and Nigh Full Power Kashtira. Full Power Branded? Jokes aside, Vanquish Soul I think fails to convert more because of Maxi than because of the existence of Full Power Branded. Remember when this was expected to be the third-ish best deck post-Dabble due to a strong tier limit matchup, then proceeded to get about 2 tops ever? So we don't have Electromite, but I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't think it matters. I don't think there was any world in which this deck was going to be taken seriously. This one's really weird to me. Gishki was like the way to play Sprite for a significant amount of time in the OCG, thanks in part to Evagishki Naramanis. In the TCG, Sprite Elf was banned, which is a lot of the reason why the deck was playable in the first place, but I think there were a couple of events and weekends in which you could play the deck at something similar to Full Power, and people just didn't. They just elected not to. They were like, I don't really want to pay 5,000 life points in order to make this guy. I think we are just too stupid to play Zephyra. Our excessive consumption of McDonald's has filled the part of our brain responsible for Zephyr combos with McNuggies. I'm pretty sure that if our pineal gland was not calcified, we could unlock the secrets of this deck. Old One says have missed, but Zombie Teledad. Due to banlist plus release date differences, TCG did not have Brionic and Cardiff Safe Return at the same time, which was integral to the build success in the OCG. The deck was relegated to being worse than standard Teledad here. I will be completely honest with you. Having played a significant amount of the Teledad formats with Alex, I think Zombie Dad is one of the least explored decks in that format. It just feels so explosive. This one's crazy. It is wild. So Ellie says, for some reason, in like 9 consecutive formats, Pure Dragon Maid was a top 3 deck in the OCG and has seen absolutely no success in the TCG besides a Chamber Splash and some Dragon Link brews. This one's wild. Again, another one of those decks where you can be like, oh, it plays nicely around Maxi, but I don't think it plays so nicely that it goes from being a top 3 deck to literally unplayable. Okay, this is the classic. Yes, Exodia FTK was busted in OCG from a couple of months in late 1999 to early 2000 because the way that Sandgan and Witch of the Black Forest worked is they would trigger whenever they went to the graveyard and not when they went to the graveyard from the field. And as a result, you could just kill your opponent turn 1 constantly. Sprite is not a bad example. In the OCG, this thing was tier 00000. There were formats in which you would look at the top cut breakdown and it would just be a big picture of Sprite Blue. But in the TCG, it, I think, capped out at 50% of top cuts and only went down from there. By the end of the format, it was clear that maybe Tearlament was better before the release of the Ishizus. I legitimately think that the OCG just didn't experiment enough with alternative tier brews. The coolest deck in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, completely unplayable because 2 cards were banned. I will be completely honest with you. Good. We should definitely have kept Block Dragon banned. I do not want this shit to be playable. And we go, wow, look at this fun, cool deck. Actually, it's really good that the deck whose power play is to hand loop you with Power Tool Dragon 2 is not legal. I think that's really awesome. Back in early 2011, when our window to the OCG format was Shriek, tournament reports of the OCG were filled with junk Doppel. Historically, the deck was a top contender in the TCG too, but due to various card pool differences, getting Librarian late, Tengu, the version running junk Synchron isn't it. True Draco Cosmo Metal Foe. A couple of TD Metal Foes topped over here, but they were never as dominant, and the Cosmo variants were completely unseen. I tried to make it work, but couldn't see the same success as the OCG. This is a pretty good one. Again, weird to be like a big combo deck like True Draco Metal Foe Cosmo was more popular in a format where Maxi existed, but over here, yeah, we just couldn't get Metal Foe Cosmo to take off. I remember playing at the Worlds that year, at regionals that year, and there were always people around the top tables who were trying to make it work, but just couldn't get it. It didn't really flop per se, but I don't have a ton of better examples that aren't like Earth Slurry. Infernoble was much stronger in the OCG than it was here, and the builds differed greatly. I still hold that X-Paladin was the better combo starter by far. This list looks a lot different than what we played. I don't recall too many people being on 3 Ogier. When they banned Kid Kalos, this was the best deck for 2 weeks. I remember the week that Kid Kalos got banned, oh, thank goodness they posted it. Tri-Brigade took up 28% of the metagame. This deck is no longer played. Nothing changed. They just elected to stop playing this deck because it was actually not very good. Literal week 1 shit. Matthew Foster says, I get Heat Soul was released way later in the TCG, but it was always funny that this was like the 3rd or 4th best deck for 2 years straight. Ugh. It literally looks like a 2013 deck. Like, this is how people were building wind-ups. Half the deck is 1-card combos, and the rest is just traps. While Synchro Cat was good here, OCG Synchro Cat was very good at the same time as Dad. This is because they had Brio out, allowing for Cat, make Brio, pre-mat to get back Cat, Brio bounce pre-mat, rinse and repeat. That's what we were trying to do in progression, and you all told I wish I was dead he was a moron. Clearly the OCG isn't always as illustrative as we expect it will be, but I'm hoping that at least Rescue Ace is playable. Streamer, talk about how DDD's getting their structure deck very late, made the deck strong for only exactly 1 femtosecond. This is like a DDD was supposed to release Zodiac. You can just fill in the blanks on this. You all know this one.